in the system, and there was a flight of capital from the markets.
So they are in trouble.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so basically these countries, which is also not mentioned in the case, so they are producing low-end electronic products. Okay. So like before China started, they started producing this low-end electronic goods. So and they were doing well. It was basically export-driven country, and naturally there are a lot of foreign investment in these countries. So basic idea, and what you said is they pegged their currency. Why you peg your currency? Basically, there are many advantages. There are disadvantages also. Advantages is, suppose today there are a lot of foreign capital. Okay, suppose today you borrow 1 million baht, Thai baht. So today $1 is equal to say $1 is equal to say 20 baht. So $1 million will be equal to 20 million baht. Okay, so if the exchange rate is fixed, so what happens is at the time of repayment you have to repay $1 million. So you pay 20 million baht to buy $1 million. However, if your exchange rate fluctuates, suppose instead of $1 is equal to 20 baht, suppose it becomes $1 is equal to 30 baht. So the same $1 million now you will be buying for 30 million baht. So due to exchange rate fluctuations, you will be paying 10 million baht extra. So the profit which you made by borrowing at a lower cost in the overseas market will be eaten by the exchange rate fluctuations. Okay, so that is why they pegged their currency. Only exception was South Korea, which did not. So it was basically Thailand, Philippines. So these are the countries which pegged their currency with US dollar. Okay. So can we start with the first question? So the first question says basically, what are the origins of Asian financial crisis? So there are many. So they tied their currency with US dollar. They tied their currency with US dollar. Why they tied their currency with US dollar? That we have discussed. So basically you can divide this into two parts. One is external factors, one is internal problems. Okay, so external factors is basically loss of export competitiveness. Why loss of export competitiveness? They tied their currencies to the US dollar, and dollar appreciated against yen. So what happens if dollar appreciated against yen? Since their currency was fixed with US dollar, so their currency also appreciated against yen. So Japanese goods became cheaper in their country and their goods became costlier in Japan. Not only that, Japanese goods became cheaper in the rest of the world and their goods became costlier to the rest of the world. Okay, because it is not that since they fixed their currency with US dollar and since US dollar appreciated against yen, so that is why their currency also appreciated against yen. Not only that, during that time only, Chinese yuan depreciated against US dollar. Now, when your currency appreciates, the other currency depreciates. So when I say US dollar appreciated against Japanese yen, that means Japanese yen depreciated against US dollar. Similarly, Chinese currency, Chinese yuan depreciated against US dollar. Now, when Chinese yuan depreciated against US dollar, Chinese yuan depreciated against these currencies also. So China got a competitive advantage in export over these countries. So when China got an advantage, this country lost the opportunity. So they lost the export competitiveness due to appreciation of US dollar against yen and depreciation of Chinese yuan against dollar. Any question on this part?
So initially, there was when yen was when yen was depreciating, the Japanese company moved to these countries, smaller countries. At the beginning, it was profitable for them.
give you a numerical example.
So like in the case only it was written that when the yen was appreciating, it was very costly for Japanese to produce in their country. So they moved their industries to the Thailand and these countries. Right. At the beginning of the case, it was written. So it was profitable when they pegged their currency against the, with
US
the dollar.
Hmm.
So later on, in the case, it is written that the export, right? So the industries, once they moved to Japan, and later on, when it again went back to the China, because they produce the same commodity, the electronic market.
Right.
So how do they tackle this? Because the moving industry, even now also, people want to change their industry from out of China.
It's not in one day. It's not in one day. But today it is not that in one day your currency Chinese yuan depreciated by 25%. Now suppose, let me clarify first why it is happening. Today $1 is equal to 5 Thai baht, and today $1 is equal to say 100 yen. Okay. So suppose this you are producing in Japan and this you are producing in Thailand. Okay. So in Thailand, your cost plus profit comes to 5 Thai baht. So you are selling it to US for $1. In Japan also, your cost plus profit comes to 100 yen. So you are selling to US for 100 yen. Now US dollar appreciated against yen. So now $1 is equal to 120 yen. Okay. But there is no change in your case. So in case of Thailand, so Thailand, you are a manufacturer of Thailand, you are still selling it for $1. But what about the Japanese manufacturer? Japanese manufacturer, its cost and profit is 100 yen. Now 120 yen is equal to $1. So, but I want, by selling this, I want how much? 100 yen. So now I can sell it at a price less than $1. Why? Earlier 100 yen was equal to $1. Now 120 yen is equal to $1. So I want 100 yen. So I can sell it at a price of less than $1. So that is why Japanese companies, they got an export competitiveness over these companies. Okay. So, and same thing happened for China. Why? Because since their currency were pegged or fixed with Japanese, with US dollar, that is why their currency also, when US dollar appreciated, their currency also appreciated against Japanese yen. The first part is clear?
Yes, sir.
What is the second part of your question?
So why like how this plays on?
Shifting does not take place in one day, over a period of time. See, initially, if you see, when Japan, after the Second World War, when Japan started growing, Japan grew by, see, it is not there in the case, I'm just giving you the background. Japan grew by exporting to US, okay? Initially, Japan grew by exporting to US. But the point is, slowly over a period of time, Japan became costlier. Why? They were, everybody was manufacturing in Japan, but slowly Japan became costlier than US. So then came these countries, and then came China, and till now China cost of production, though everybody said now cost of manufacturing in China has gone up like anything, and it is as good as US. Yeah. But still, with the help of infrastructure and logistics and other things, people are still manufacturing in China with everything available. And Japan, there is a problem of space also. China, it's a huge country. So there are other factors. Question is, when these countries are manufacturing, and when there is a change in the exchange rate, then other countries are getting the benefit. Now, you are getting an advantage as far as export is concerned, but in one day you don't shift the manufacturing base. So over a period of time, when you find that the other countries are cheaper, they are providing you the infrastructure, etc., then only you go and produce in those countries. It's not that today China, in US, cost of manufacturing is say at par with China, or cost of manufacturing in US is suppose lower than China. So all the companies will stop producing in China and they'll shift their base in US. It's not that, not in one day. Over a period of time it happens. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? So then there
like
is
the present context, I was thinking like the Indian government wants to get the Chinese, right, PLI schemes and that, and I'm
see,
seeing how the
point is if you want to make your if you want to provide manufacturing facilities to other, there are a lot of other factors which you need to take into account. Land is an issue all over the world, especially in India. It is not only in West Bengal or UP or other places. So land is an issue all over the world, including India. So if you have land, that does not mean you can have a production facilities. You also have to have infrastructure. Infrastructure not only means roads and bridges, it also means supply of raw material. That is another thing. China supplies more than 15 or 16% raw material to the rest of the world. So how do you get those raw materials? Everybody will like to set up their businesses near the place where the raw materials are available. Then logistics, supply chain. So all these things are very, very important. Port. Got it? So
yes,
today, if you want, you cannot, like, you can always say, I have cheap labor. Cheap labor is not the only issue now. Those days are gone. You will provide cheap labor, but they are not efficient. Not solve the problem. You have efficient cheap labor, but there is no raw material available. By the time you will bring the raw material from China, it will become more costlier here. Okay? Got it?
understood.
So first factor is clear, that is appreciation of yen and depreciation of yuan. Second factor is definitely moral hazard. So what is a moral hazard? Basically, what we have found that these countries government had given an implicit guarantee to bank and financial institutions to lend funds to risky projects. I repeat, government had given an implicit guarantee to banks and financial institutions to lend money to the risky projects, and the banks and financial institutions, they lend money to the risky projects on the assumptions that profit will be theirs, but the losses will be taken care of by the government. Okay, so this is what is called moral hazard, tendency to finance projects which are not commensurate with the risk, where the return is not commensurate with the risk. So that is what is called moral hazard. Along with that, there is something called crony capitalism, which is also similar to this, which we especially see in the emerging markets, where friends and relatives of the politicians and etc., they take money, they do not repay, or they take money for risky projects, they get all the contracts, though they are inefficient. So these are all called crony capitalism. So which is not only there in India, it is also there in many developing countries. It is not that it is not there in developed countries, but it is less. So is that fine? So if there is no market discipline, so market discipline means you fund projects, risky projects where there is proper return. And the last factor was basically when the problem started, then there was a capital flight. Now capital flight in two ways. One was foreign investors, they withdraw money. And second was local investors also, they started dumping their own currency and invested the money outside. So basically one major thing which these companies, these Asian companies had done, they funded their long-term projects with short-term funds. Let me give you an example. Suppose you have taken a housing educational loan. So educational loan you have taken, suppose for a period of say 10 years. So what will happen? Once you complete your graduation, you get a job. So every month whatever salary you get, with that you repay the loan. However, suppose you have taken a loan for 6 months, and after every 6 months you go to the bank and say that, okay, let me get the job, I'll repay the loan. You renew the loan. So banks are keeping on renewing the loan, and you get a job. You every month you repay a portion of the loan, and after every 6 months you go to the bank and renew your loan. Banks will renew your loan as long as banks will see that you are able to, you have a decent job and you are able to repay the loan. As soon as the bank will find that you are not in a position to repay the loan, bank will not renew the loan. Bank will ask the entire money. Now the question is, why you take a loan for a period of 6 months? Why not take a loan for 10 years? The answer is long-term loans are more stable, but they are more costly. Short-term loans are very unstable. That is, unless you renew, unless the lender renews the loan, you have to repay. But they are less costly. So why people try to fund long-term projects with short-term funds? The reason is short-term funds are cheaper than the long-term funds, but they are risky also. So the banks and financial institutions, they were renewing their short-term loan, as long as they found that the companies were in a position to repay, and when there was a default, government is in a position to bail them out. But once they found that government is not in a position to bail out everybody, they started withdrawing their investment. And when, suppose in the example which I have given you, suppose bank says that no, you have to repay the money because the loan was taken for 6 months. So there are two options you have. Either you default. So if you default, government will bail you out. Okay. Or you sell your assets and repay the loan. Now, if you sell your assets, which you bought for the purpose of production, if you sell those assets, then naturally you are in trouble. That is what happened in case of Asian financial crisis. Is that clear? Anybody?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
So majorly what, if you see, one is they got an external shocks from, appreciation of dollar against Japanese yen and depreciation of Chinese yuan, and they fix their currency. There are moral hazard and crony capitalism. Then they funded their long-term projects with short-term funds. So when the trouble started, the foreign investors stopped, renewed their loan, and they started withdrawing money. Initially, government bailed out some companies, but later on it was not possible for the government to bail out everybody. So that is what has happened. Any question up to this point?
No, sir.
What role did expectations play in the Asian currency crisis?
So it actually influenced George Soros actually shorted this Thai baht, right? So he was criticized. George Soros, I guess. The investors were expecting this, and
George Soros did not do it in here. He had done this in UK pound, with UK pound. So that is
Thai baht also.
Huh?
Thai baht. In Thailand, what currency he did even that also now.
George Soros mentioned in the case.
No, but I'm saying the expectation which he created,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So that is what you are saying. George Soros had, I don't think George Soros sold Thai baht. I don't know, not mentioned in the case. But what George Soros had done, that is what is against speculation, and that is done basically where, in order to, when the speculators attack, they attack everybody. So when they found that the currency is in trouble, so it is, the price of assets are falling, so they start selling the asset, and when they start selling the assets, they fall further. And when they start selling the asset, on the assumption that in future they will fall further. So they sell now, and in future when they will fall again, So they will buy back at a lower price and make the difference is their profit. So that is why, and when the speculators attack, they will attack heavily. They will not see what happens to your country. So, and this expectation, that is it will fall further, played a very important role, because the last class I told you, that is what will be the exchange rate, one major role is expectation. Here there are a lot of expectations. Initially, as I have told you, this is the last expectation, what we have discussed, that is that the currency is going to fall further. But initially, when government was, bailing out them, everybody thought that government will, as long as they expected that the government will bail out, they kept on renewing their loan. But as soon as they found, that is expected, that it will not be possible for the government to bail out everybody, then what happened? They stopped renewing the loan. Okay. So as a result, what happened? Everybody started selling assets. So when they started selling assets, the asset prices started falling. When asset prices started falling, everybody expected that it will fall further. So there is a selling pressure. Okay. So that is why there was of course a capital flight. When there is a capital flight, naturally everybody takes money out of the country. So thus exchange rate expectations played a very, very important role. You can watch a movie, The Big Short, where we'll see what role expectations play and how speculators attack. Any question? How did the appreciation of US dollar and depreciation of the yuan affect the timing and magnitude of the Asian crisis? See, since there is a moral hazard, sooner or later there would have been a trouble. But since both of them happened together, it basically speed up the crisis. Okay? Anything?
So that was a trigger point for the hazard, like it would be a trigger point.
Come again.
And we say that appreciation of the US dollar was just a trigger point for the already existing issues.
See, if you have only one problem, then it is something. There are many problems. First of all, appreciation of US dollar against yen and depreciation of Chinese yuan, you lose your export competitiveness, and these countries grew by exporting to US and Europe. Okay, so first, this is your first hit. Second hit was these projects where many of them were not that profitable, where the banks had given loan. It is not only that these companies only defaulted, the financial institutions also borrowed money, they also defaulted. Why? Because they had given loan to these companies which could not pay them. As a result, the financial institution could not repay the loan which they had taken from the foreign banks and foreign institutions. Now, if your business is good, probably you'll be able to absorb the shock, but your business is not good. Why it is not good? Because it is not profitable. Got it? That is what is, so all taken together. And see, when you have a moral hazard, that is, moral hazard means suppose you take too much of risk, which is not commensurate with the return. So naturally, today or tomorrow, you will suffer. But the point is, these two events basically speed up the process. Is that okay? Shattopriya.
Yes, sir.
Satyapriya. Yeah. How do you pronounce Shattopriya?
Satyapriya.
Satyapriya. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Moral hazard. I told you. What is moral hazard? Why they borrowed dollar, Deutschmark instead of their local currency?
The interest rate.
So lower interest rate. And of course, I told you we started international finance with the point that emerging markets need capital. Okay. So they also needed capital, and the interest rate was low in the overseas market in foreign currency. That is why they borrowed foreign currency. So any other question on Asian financial crisis? Otherwise, we'll shift to Argentina. Any question? Can we start the Argentina financial crisis? Red?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ajit? 3D?
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm good, sir.
Ajit, you read the Argentina case?
Yes, sir.
Can you summarize?
Yes, sir. In 1992, prior to 1992, Argentina was going through hyperinflation at a rate of about 2,700%. To solve that, the Argentina financial minister decided to, instead of shifting from dollar, they decided to also go for currency swap with the euro. And so then, because of that, so then the prices stabilized and they got the inflation under control, and they also started to liberalize the economy. But then they didn't. But then they forgot. But then, so then they also then go for long-term planning, and hence the inflation started to rise up again in 2003, and they had to go, and then they had to currency devalued, and also the
Not exactly.
export, and then other countries such as China, they.
Not exactly, Ajit. Anybody else?
Sir, may I give it a try?
Yeah, sure. Rishabh.
Okay, sir. Basically, there was a time when Argentina was going through hyperinflation, and that continued for a long period of time because there was extensive increase in the interest rates and other things, and due to acute mismanagement of economy. But then they decided to change. After a point of time, they decided to change their exchange rate system to currency-based arrangements. They passed a law,
Currency board.
which
Currency
board arrangements, and they passed a law to fix the currency to the dollar, making it equal to $1, and that made sure that it was not possible for the banks to just print money to bail out the government at most of the times, which was happening beforehand. This helped.
Just let me correct you at this time. So currency board system, you pass a legislative act and you fix your currency where not only so what is there in the act, that is the monetary authority will not have the power to print money. So in any country, who prints money? The central bank or the monetary, they are called the monetary authority. So they have the power to print money. So initial stage when why there was so much of inflation over a period of 50 years? The reason being, Argentina, the expenses were very high, much more than their income, and they were managing the deficit by printing money. Now, if you keep on printing money, that will fuel inflation. Okay, so printing money does not solve all the problem. Earlier we talked about Zimbabwe, where Zimbabwe was just trying to print money and trying to solve the problem, and there were hyperinflation which went up to billion percentage. Okay. Now, what is the exact definition of hyperinflation? I don't know, or probably not written, but 2,400 or 700% is something which we cannot imagine also. So 1 billion percentage, first time when I saw, I thought it is a printing mistake. Yeah. But anyway, so when so that is the reason. So in order to bring in discipline, what is the discipline? So this Convertibility Act, which they passed, where they introduced currency board system, as well as their monetary authority no longer had the right to print money whenever they feel like. Okay. Government could no longer, monetary authority means government could no longer print money to finance a budget deficit. So that was basically was there. And effectively, Argentine currency was locked with US dollar. So when you fix your currency with another country's currency, then you have to coordinate your monetary and fiscal policy with that country's currency. Now, Argentina had an indisciplined monetary and fiscal policy. Okay, so by locking your currency, you also coordinate the monetary and fiscal policy with US, which is supposed to be a disciplined, economy, and their monetary policy is also disciplined. So that is why you bring in discipline in your monetary and fiscal policy or economic policies. Is that okay? So the condition of the country was such that I believe you must have seen in the case it is written that within a period of 2 weeks they had 4 presidents. Now why they had 4 presidents within a period of 2 weeks? Very simple, because whoever is coming to and whoever is taking the baton of the country, so is once he comes and by seeing the condition, he could make out that it will not be possible for him to bail out or to save the country. So they were resigning. And in fact, it is also written the finance minister, once he saw the budget, he had a heart attack. So expenses were so high than the income. Is that clear? Okay.
Yes.
Sir,
So
I
that
have a
is,
doubt.
now we have not yet started the case. Discussing the case. Just the brief about the case. Yeah.
Sir,
Doubt.
what do we exactly mean here by locking the currency with the US dollar?
$1 is equal to, initially it was 10,000 Austral. So instead of 10,000 Austral, so they introduced a new currency called peso, where 1 peso is equal to 10,000 Austral. So basically it is demonetization of Austral and remonetization of peso. So $1 is equal to 1 peso. Now this is a fixed exchange rate system. So government has to maintain this rate. How government maintains this rate? If there is a huge amount of dollar inflow, then the rate will be threatened. So naturally, government will buy dollar in order to maintain that rate. Similarly, if there is a huge amount of dollar outflow, so government will sell dollar in order to maintain this exchange rate. Okay, so there will be government intervention. But along with that, if you have a huge amount of budget deficit, then you cannot print money. If you print money, then the money supply of your country will go up, which will again threaten the rate. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Okay.
So can you start the case? First question says, what was the impetus for Argentina's currency board system? Naturally, it was the country was suffering from a vicious cycle of inflation and devaluation of currency. So currency board system was an attempt to break this vicious cycle because a huge amount of budget deficit, and naturally this currency board system along with this convertibility act gave the which was passed. And it said that government can no longer print money in order to finance the budget deficits, and effectively locking Argentina into US monetary system. What do you mean by US monetary system? If US increases the rate of interest, you will also have to increase the rate of interest. Now, when you fix your currency with another country's currency, the other day, if you remember, we talked about majorly the 7 factors which basically determine your exchange rate. Basically, I said those 7 factors are not the only one. Along with that, there are expectations. So one of them is interest rate. So if you increase the interest rate, then what happens? There will be more foreign capital to your country, which will threaten your rate. Similarly, if the other country increases the interest rate, if you don't, the capital will go out of your country. Similarly, for inflation, if there is inflation, your goods will become, if you have inflation in your country, that will, depreciate your currency. If your currency depreciates, your goods will become cheaper in their country. So there will be more capital inflow and vice versa. So you have to maintain the inflation, interest rate, all these things along with the country with which you have fixed your currency. But there is a difference between fixed exchange system and currency board system. Fixed exchange system, you don't pass a law where you don't have the right of not printing the money. But in a currency board system, you pass a law where you do not have the right to print money. Okay? Proceed.
Yes, sir.
So how successful was Argentina's currency board system? Quite successful, because the country was suffering from a hyperinflation over a period of 50 years. Remember, once upon a time, Argentina was the 6th or 7th largest economy in the world. And from that, the country suffered a lot from hyperinflation, devaluation, etc., etc. So once they introduced that, the peso was fixed with $1. The inflation came down from 2,300% in 1992, 170% in 1991, then 4% in 1994, and by 1997, the inflation rate was 0.4%, which was one of the lowest in the world during that period of time. So as a result, what happened? Since the rate of inflation is less, then the dollar stock prices were up. There are foreign portfolio investment, and Argentine capital which went back earlier to other countries that came back. Is that fine? Can you hear me properly?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, does it need explanation why Argentine capital came back and all? See, again, I'm telling you, if you have more inflation, your currency is likely to depreciate. Today, suppose $1 is equal to 75 rupees. Okay, you borrow $1 million, which is equal to 75 million rupees. So if there is high inflation, your currency will depreciate. So it will be $1 becomes 77 rupees. So at the time of repayment, to repay $1 million, you have to shell out 77 million rupees. So naturally, if you have high inflation, nobody will invest in your country. So they will invest outside. So what were the problems? That is what led to the downfall of Argentina's currency board. Again, there are external shocks and internal problems. So again, what do you mean by what are the external shocks? First thing is they also peg their currency with US dollar. First thing is there are crises in different parts of the world. For example, Russian and Brazilian financial crisis, Mexican peso crisis, Asian crisis. Now, why, if there is a crisis in other parts of the world, how it affects? So I told you earlier also, when there is a problem in an emerging market, the speculators, they attack. And the investors, in order to save themselves from the speculators, what they do, they sell the assets in the emerging markets and park it in the safe haven, that is US dollar. I repeat, when the speculators attack, what they do, they sell their assets in the emerging market and park it in the safe haven, that is US dollar. US dollar means assets denominated in US dollar. So when there are crises in Mexico, they not only sold Mexican assets. In fact, Mexico, when there was a crisis in Mexico, there was a famous dialogue of Bill Clinton. He said that since it's Mexico, I am bailing out. It was US which bailed out Mexico. They defaulted on their loan. Russia also defaulted on their loan. So when Mexico, the Bill Clinton said, since it's Mexico, I am bailing out. Had it been India, I wouldn't have. Okay. So what do you mean by that? Because America has a lot of trade with Mexico. So a lot of American companies, they have manufacturing hub in Mexico. So if there is any, if Mexico is in financial difficulty, that will also affect the American companies. Okay, so that is why America bailed out Mexico. Now, another very important thing is that is definitely it will affect. So Mexico, Brazil, these countries will affect Argentina more because they are neighboring countries than Asian crisis, Asia or Russia, etc., etc. However, as I've told you, when there is a problem in one part of the globe, it will affect the emerging market of the other parts. Okay, so first is there are crises in different parts of the world. Second thing is devaluation of Brazilian real. Now, why devaluation of Brazilian real means? Brazil and Argentina, they are close neighbors, you know, and they have a lot of trades among themselves. So Brazilian real is devalued means Brazilian goods became cheaper in Argentina and Argentine goods became costlier in Brazil. So Argentina lost export competitiveness against Brazil. Okay, I repeat, Brazilian goods, devaluation of Brazilian real means Brazilian goods, Argentine goods became cheaper, costlier in Brazil, and Brazilian goods became cheaper in Argentina. Okay. Not only that, there was strong appreciation of US dollar. Last case also we have seen there was strong appreciation of US dollar in late 90s. So since Argentine peso was fixed with US dollar, so when US dollar increases, US dollar appreciates, naturally Argentine peso also appreciate against the other currency. So initially when Brazilian real is devalued, we find that Argentina lost export competitiveness to Brazil. But when your dollar appreciates against most of the currencies in the world, so since Argentine peso is fixed with, it is at a fixed exchange rate with dollar, it also appreciates with most of the currencies in the world. So Argentina here lose export competitiveness to the rest of the world. So one is devaluation of Brazilian real. Number two is appreciation of US dollar. Okay. So these are the two most important thing. So these are, you can say, external problems. So what are the external problems? Mainly crisis, and of course, fall in commodity prices. Argentina and Brazil, they sell a lot of commodities like it is coffee belt, sugar belt. Huh? So in not only coffee and sugar, there are other commodities also. Since there is a fall in the commodity prices, the revenue from export has also gone down. Argentina's revenue from export has also gone down. So basically, three external crises, if you see, one is definitely fall in commodity prices, one is problems in different parts of the world, crisis in different parts of the world, and number three is devaluation of Brazilian real and appreciation of US dollar. Okay, so these are the external problems. What are the internal problems? Major internal problems was basically strict rigid labor laws. Now they introduced the currency board system in order to bring in discipline. Okay, now one part of your discipline is whatever your expenditure, you should, or whatever is your income, your expenditure should commensurate with your income. Let me give you an example. If you have a huge amount of fiscal deficit, first of all, you know that there will be inflation. Okay. And if there is inflation, you came out of inflation, you introduced a currency board system in order to come out of the inflation. And one major reason for the high inflation was huge fiscal deficit. Now, Argentina had a strict labor laws. Now, cutting down labor or reducing the salary does not solve the problem. But when you have to cut down your expenditure, let me tell you, that is, if your expenditures are more than your income, so naturally you are into trouble. So how to come out of that? You need to reduce your expenditure. Suppose you are a salaried person, you earn a salary of X 100 rupees. So if your expenditures are more than 100 rupees, then what happens? You borrow money. Now, if you borrow money to pay your day-to-day expenses, that means you are in a debt trap. You are taking loan. How do you repay the loan? You don't have an avenue. Okay. On the other hand, suppose that does not mean fiscal deficit is bad per se. Why? Suppose your income is 100 rupees and now you borrow money and with that money you buy a house. So every month, whatever money you earn in the form of salary, from that, after meeting your day-to-day expenses, one money is utilized to repay the loan. So here in the process, you are making a capital asset. So that means when you have a fiscal deficit where you create capital asset by investing money in capital assets, that is good. But if it is to pay for your day-to-day expenses, which was the case for Argentina, that is not good. So they had a huge strict labor law, so they could not cut down the expenses. So instead, they had a huge fiscal deficit, and you can see it is written in a year when GDP, in a decade that saw GDP growing by 50%, public spending rose by 90%. So how do you make up this excess spending? Initially, it was from selling of state-owned enterprises, but later on when that was exhausted, so what do? Again, they started borrowing because they could not print money this time. So they started borrowing and increased taxes. Now, if you increase taxes, then what happens? The public will have less money to spend. If the public has less money to spend, again, what will happen? There will be less amount of production. If there is less amount of production, there will be more unemployment. So you are in a vicious cycle. That is, on one side, you should reduce your public expenditure. On the other side, if you reduce your public expenditure, naturally, there will be more unemployment. Okay? So you are in a vicious cycle. So again, there was a huge amount of fiscal deficit, huge amount of debt, high amount of unemployment, economic stagnation, and as soon as you have these signals, there will be capital flight. Why capital flight? People will start thinking, expectation again, people will start thinking the country is in a bad shape, and these are the indicators. So the investors who invested money in this country, they will start withdrawing money. So, and people are generally not happy. So the bold currency experiment unraveled political and economic chaos. So basically it was a failure of the politicians to reform the country's labor laws. So what they should have done, they should have introduced economic liberalization and fiscal discipline. Instead, what they had done, failed economic policies of Peronism and ended with a disaster. Any question, confusion? Question, confusion?
No, sir.
Clear?
Yes, sir.
Let me tell you a story. You were talking about strict labor laws. Now, cutting down labor is not the problem, not the solution. But at the same time, you have to reduce the public expenditure. So there is another case study which I sometimes also do. There was a problem in Bolivia also. Bolivia also had hyperinflation, 2000 some percentage. Hyperinflation due to spending and all. So there was a time, the finance minister, what he used to do. At the end of every day, he used to spend money, that is, issue a check on the basis of whatever amount was earned on that day. Just imagine, how do you control the spending? End of the day, you are issuing a check on the basis of whatever amount you are earning on that day. Suppose on a particular day, you collect a tax of, $100. So naturally, the currency, I think Bolivia's currency was Bolivar. So at the end of the day, you earn 100 Bolivar. So you issue a check for 100 Bolivar. So that was the way they tried to control. So situation was like that. Well, what is the moral of the case? What lessons do you learn? Currency board system is not a substitute of, good economic policies, that is good monetary and fiscal policy. So it was initially the currency board system acted very well, but it collapsed because the collapse because of their bad fiscal and unsound policies, and investors realize that the politicians, they are not changing this not changing this policies, so naturally they started withdrawing money. So basically this currency board system is not a substitute of economic monetary and fiscal policy. Question?
Sir, there's this doubt that in both these cases, we found that whenever they fixed their currency or pegged their currency against the US dollars, they had to suffer whenever the US dollar appreciated. So would this lead to some sort of generalization that, fixing or pegging your currency to a fixed dollar rate, that is, or a fixed dollar currency, or I mean, a fixed currency for anything, that can be a disastrous thing for an economy?
No,
Like, what can be the positive side of this thing?
No, first of all, how much I have done, I don't remember in your exchange rate system. So basically, did I complete fixed exchange rate system?
Yes, sir. Like you mentioned about all the exchange rate systems, and we had completed till the impossible trinity, which we had.
Till impossible trinity we have done. So
yes, sir. Yes. Sir.
So there you must have seen, that is what are the advantages of fixed exchange rate system. In a fixed exchange rate system, what happens is basically you major reason one is for an emerging market like Argentina and all, you bring in fiscal discipline and monetary discipline in the country, okay, in the economic system. But the most important reason for which the fixed exchange rate system is good is basically the managing exchange rate risk. As I have told you, that is, consider a country like India. India was also a fixed exchange rate system regime. Our currency was pegged with UK pound, fixed with UK pound. Now, when you have a fixed exchange rate system, then suppose, as I have given you the example, suppose today you borrow $1 million and $1 million is equal to 75 rupees, okay. Or suppose there is a foreign portfolio investment, one foreign portfolio investor brings in $1 million, he will be converting his $1 million into Indian rupees, say at a price of 75, okay. So how much he has? 75 million rupees. Now suppose he wants to withdraw the money, so again he has to buy dollar. Now today if he wants to buy $1 million, and if the exchange rate from $1 is equal to 75 moves to $1 is equal to 77, so naturally he has to shell out 77 million rupees to get $1 million, or in other words, whatever money he has, with that he will not be able to buy $1 million. So one major thing of fixed exchange rate is it will give you a protection against the risk of exchange rate fluctuation. Okay, so that is one of the biggest advantage. Along with that, it gives policy anchor, because when you fix your currency, it is expected that you will be following you will coordinate the monetary and fiscal policy of the developed country. So as a result, this thing will be better. So there will be more monetary and fiscal discipline in your country. Make sense? But you
yes,
lose.
Sir, I got a bit of an idea.
Then you might have a question, then why not fixed exchange rate system? The fixed exchange rate system, if you have, then you lose the monetary policy independence. So last time when we had done impossible trinity, that time I told you, you also need monetary policy independence for the simple reason, without monetary policy independence, how do you control inflation in your country? Because after doing these two cases, one thing is clear, that is, any country's economic condition does not depend only on the internal problems, it also depends upon the external shocks. Now, internally, if you are stable, then it will be easier for you to absorb the external shocks. But if you are fragile in both the sides, like internally as well as externally, naturally you will suffer a lot, which happened in case of Asian crisis as well as Argentina crisis. If you see among the Asian countries, South Korea suffered least. Why? Not only first of all, they did not peg their currency with US dollar, so they had the monetary policy independence, and their economy was also not so much vulnerable to the rest of the world. So naturally, their condition was slightly better. So that is why it did not suffer so much. So during the financial crisis of 2007-8 also, you will see that there are some countries which suffered more, some countries which suffered less. India is a country which suffered slightly less than many other countries because internal condition was better than many other countries. Internal condition of India was better than many other countries. Yes, Rishabh.
Sir, I understood your point, and I have just this one thing that if we were to assist Argentina in that point of time, like there was this that we could have, advised them to control their internal factors about their labor laws and other things. What apart from that could we have? Could they have done different to avoid this crisis? Like they did not have
See,
control over the
let
Brazilian
me
devaluation and other things.
let me tell you, give you one example. It's like you have comorbidities and then you have a coronavirus attack. Got my point? So which will basically fuel the fire and your health deteriorates very fast. So it does not happen in one day. It was a vicious cycle. So, and there is no shortcut method to this. First of all, these labor laws and all, when you are in trouble at that time, if you think of, what do you call, reforming the labor laws, it will not help you. So unfortunate part is when everything is good, nobody will ask you questions. When your economy is doing well, when they will not ask any questions to the politicians. But unfortunate part is when it does not do well, then all these problems will come, and speculators will also attack at that point of time. And it did not happen in one day. They could have done it throughout this period. And if you remember, last class we discussed that when we are doing the exchange rate mechanism, we discussed that no system is good for one country throughout, and similarly no system is good for all the countries. The reason is very simple. That is what, when you applied currency board system at that time, it was necessary because the major problem was hyperinflation, and which basically the reason for that was basically your printing of money. So you restricted that and you control the inflation, and the economy was doing good. Inflation was one of the lowest in the world. So at that time, since it was doing good, that does not mean that you will do whatever you feel like. So at that time, probably if you would have taken some steps, things would have been different. So when the problem started, everything was out of control. Okay, and all over the world, remember, it is not only in India or Argentina, all over the world, political priorities are more important than economic priorities. So their politicians were, equally, same as other countries. So that is why they also suffered a lot. So there is no shortcut solution. Okay. So if you tell me what I would have suggested, there is no suggestion. On one side, just try to understand. When you are heading towards a recession, on one side, you have to increase the public expenditure. So how do you increase the public expenditure? Because if public has more money, then they can buy more goods. The demand will be created. There will be more production. There will be more employment. So economy will flourish. It's a normal rule. But at the same time, you are in a situation where you have to cut down your expenditure. Why? Because you have to cut down your expenditure. So first of all, there are unemployment, huge amount of unemployment. So if you want to increase if you want to solve this problem, you have to increase public expenditure. If you increase public expenditure, then your fiscal deficit will go up. If fiscal deficit goes up, so you are heading towards an inflation. So it's basically a stagflation. Inflation coupled with recession. So there is no easy solution. The country is still in trouble, huh? could not come out of that, because IMF and others, they came out with some packages. Again, political priorities are more important. Is that fine?
Yes, sir. Got a bit of an idea, sir.
Any other question? So another thing I think I told you I'll do, that is, acha, let me just.
So you told you will explain how central government influence currency. There are two types. You told me us to remind you.
Okay. Acha, just before that, let me just check. Can you see the slide?
Yes, sir.
So I think we have done this, no? So this management, everything we have done, no? Fixed rate system, current system, then IMF hard pegs, currency board arrangement, soft pegs, floating regimes, free floating, exchange rate regime, ideal regime, then impossible trinity. This we have done, huh?
Yes, sir.
Along with that, we have also discussed, I believe, financial stability part. That is, even if you along with these three, you also have to maintain financial stability in the economy. That also you have done, I believe. Okay.
Yes.
Did I mention about financial stability? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, financial stability is if you increase the rate of interest, there might be a problem, etc. Now, how central bank intervenes? So just let me give you a very simple example. Suppose today $1 is equal to 75 rupees. Fine, it is 11.19. So suddenly there is a foreign portfolio investment of $100 million. Now, $100 million is a lot of money, naturally. So first is how these foreign portfolio investors will trade in India. It will not trade through dollar. So it will convert the dollar into rupee. So if it converts the dollar into rupee, then what happens? There is a supply of dollar. So exchange rate can fluctuate. Exchange rate can fluctuate means suddenly there is a huge supply of dollar. Indian rupee is likely to appreciate. Now it is up to central bank to decide whether it will allow the rupee to appreciate, or whether it will interfere in the market or not. So suppose, let me take different suppose rupee appreciates by little bit. Suppose it is 75 rupees. From that, rupee appreciates to 74.80. And central bank thinks, okay, this is fine. The market can absorb this small appreciation. Central bank does not interfere. Fine. So there is no interference of the central bank in the market. So it's not that central bank will interfere every time. When central bank will interfere, it's totally up to central bank and how much. Okay. Suppose central bank interferes. Suppose central bank does not. Central bank thinks, no, at this moment, appreciation of rupee is not good for the economy. Now, when central bank will interfere and when it will not, that central bank will not announce and interfere. So basically, from market data, you can find out, but otherwise central bank will not announce that this should be the targeted rate and all. That will not do. So basically, from market data, we can find out whether there is an interference of the central bank or not. Anyway, so suppose central bank interferes and how central bank will interfere? Since there is a supply of dollar, that is foreign portfolio investor is selling dollar. So supply of dollar has gone up. Central bank will create a demand by buying dollar. Okay. So central bank will buy dollar. Okay. So that is what is called central bank interference. And like if the supply goes up, supply curve will shift by creating a demand. The demand curve will also shift. So as a result, we will achieve the old rate. Will achieve the old rate means suppose rate stabilizes at 75 only. So this is what is called central bank intervention. So central bank intervention can stop here also. So first one we have done, there is no intervention of central bank. Second one we have done central bank intervention. That is central foreign institutional investor is selling dollar and exchange rate can change. So central bank intervenes and buys dollar and exchanges stabilizes. Now consider a case when central bank is buying dollar, then at that time what is happening? Central bank is infusing rupee in the economy. What do you mean by that? Central bank is infusing rupee in the economy means when central bank is buying dollar at that time, with what central bank is buying dollar? Central bank is buying dollar with Indian rupee. So if it is 75 rupees is per dollar, so 75 into 100, 7,500 million rupees is infused in the economy. Yes or no? Got my point?
Yes, sir.
So as I've told you, central bank, this excess money which is infused in the economy will fuel inflation. Excess money supply fuels inflation. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So what is the situation now? There was a foreign portfolio investment. So exchange rate fluctuated. In order to stabilize the exchange rate, central bank intervened and bought the dollar. When central bank bought the dollar, what happened? There was an excess money supply in the economy. So excess money supply in the economy can fuel inflation. So in order to suck this excess liquidity from the market, central bank will issue bond. If central bank issues bond, this excess money supply, that is banks will buy bonds, so the money will come back to central bank. Is this clear? This is called sterilized intervention. Let me repeat the process once again. When central bank intervened and bought the dollar, the money supply in the economy had gone up. How the money supply in the economy had gone up? Because when central bank bought the dollar, central bank basically, or Reserve Bank basically bought the dollar against Indian rupee, and there are excess Indian rupee in the economy. So excess money supply in the economy will fuel inflation. So in order to suck this excess liquidity or excess money supply, central bank will issue bond and suck. When central bank will issue bonds, so naturally this excess money supply will come back to central bank. This is called sterilized intervention. It can be other way around also. Suppose on one particular day, one foreign portfolio investors is selling the stocks and withdrawing money. So when selling the stocks and withdrawing money, what happens? It will convert the Indian rupee to dollar. So there will be a demand for dollar. So if there is a demand for dollar, again central bank can intervene and central bank may not intervene. If central bank intervenes and tries to stabilize the exchange rate, so what it will do? It will sell dollar. So if it sells dollar, then it sucks liquidity from the market. So if central bank's intervention stops here, it is without sterilization. But suppose central bank thinks this liquidity which is dried up. Why liquidity dried up? Because central bank bought when central bank sold the dollar, it sold against Indian rupee. Okay. So when central bank sold the dollar, it got money. So when central bank got Indian rupee, so this amount of Indian rupee is taken out of the economy. So liquidity dried up in the economy. So in order to infuse liquidity in the economy, central bank will buy back bond from the market. So as a result, liquidity will be infused in the market. So this is called sterilized intervention. So intervention followed by a bond buying or bond selling is called sterilized intervention. You can always argue why not increasing the rate of interest to manage the liquidity or to suck out the excess liquidity or to infuse the liquidity, why not reduce the rate of interest? Now, interest rate goes up or goes down only on particular dates when the monetary policy is announced. Okay, so that is not a regular affair. Changing the rate of interest is not a regular affair. Okay, so these are all these. Central bank intervention can be a regular affair. Huh? Normally, central bank does not intervene regularly, especially RBI does not intervene regularly, but in regular intervals they can, if necessary. Question, confusion? Anybody? Akshat Bhargava. Any question?
No, sir.
Akshat Bhargav, 4D. Amritangshu, 5D. So this part is fine.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you see the slide now?
Yes, sir. Impossible unity.
Okay. So little bit of the history of international monetary system. Now, why history of international monetary system is you always have a question. Rather, we have a question why dollar is so important. Some part we'll be discussing today. So the use of gold, you have also heard about, the use of gold. There was a time everything was gold standard. You probably read when we print money, we keep equivalent amount of gold reserves and print money. So those days are over. Now it is fiat money. So you print money without keeping anything. Huh? So, but earlier it was. So why gold? So there are certain desirable properties of gold. Now you must be aware that there was a time we had barter system. Now it is gold. So basically, there are some desirable properties of gold, of course. Huh? What are the desirable properties? They are durable, storable, portable, easily recognized, divisible, and easily standardized. So silver also has these properties. Why not silver? Or maybe platinum. So silver is less costlier than gold. Platinum is more costlier than gold. Why not? So silver is more available. So that is another shortcomings. So in short run, high production costs limit short run changes. And because silver doesn't have so high production cost, but in the long run, definitely your production costs are high. Community money ensures stability. What is community money? It's gold coin. That is what is called community money. Okay. For a long period of time, we are using gold, and of course, people started using gold, or time to time, this coins changed, etc., etc. There is something called. I'll do this in brief. Reason being, we don't have so much of time to explain the entire thing in detail. But this will give you a fair idea of our present currency system. So the classical gold standard it ran for almost 100 years, 1821 to 1914. So major currencies on gold standard. So the major currencies means most of the countries, they fixed their currency with gold. So how you do that? So involved commitment by nations to fix the price of domestic currency in terms of a specific amount of gold. Suppose India fixes 100 rupees for 1 ounce of gold, and US fixes say $5 for 1 ounce of gold. So $5 is equal to 100 rupees. So when you trade, this will be the exchange rate. So something which is available in India for 100 rupees, so that will be 1 unit of gold. There is 1 ounce of gold, and if that is for available for $5 in US, that is also will be equal to 1 ounce of gold. So basically, it is the duty of the central bank to maintain this rate also. If rate fluctuates, they will buy or sell gold. Say for example, there is more inflow of gold. So more inflow of gold means if you export more, so there will be more inflow of gold. So it will be difficult for you to hold this exchange rate. Similarly, if there is more import, there will be more outflow of gold. It will be again difficult to hold this exchange rate. So at that time, if the exchange rate is threatened, it is the duty of the central bank to buy or sell gold, like in a fixed exchange rate system, buy or sell gold and maintain the rate. Okay. There is also an automatic mechanism. So automatic mechanism does not happen in one day, definitely, but this part is clear how you maintain this rate. And economists say during this period there was no inflation in the world, since everybody, because there was a restriction on printing money also, because you keep equivalent amount of gold and then only you can print money. It ran for almost 100 years, but there are problems. First, maintenance involved the buying and selling of gold at that price. So that means if you have more inflow of gold, you buy gold. Just now I have told you central bank intervention. Now, if there is a disturbance in price level, there is an automatic offset by price specific flow mechanism. Specific in gold coins. Huh? So what is this price specific flow mechanism? So consider a case. If your export goes up, then what will happen?
External currency would come in the country.
So you have a trade surplus. If there is a trade surplus, then there will be more gold in your country. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So if there is a more gold in your country, then what will happen? Your currency will appreciate.
Yes, sir.
If your currency appreciates, you lose export competitiveness.
Yes, sir.
If you lose export competitiveness, there will be gold outflow.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So automatically price will be adjusted.
Yes, sir.
But it does not happen in 1 minute or 1 day. It takes time. So this price specific, so it ran for almost a period of 100 years. Huh? So naturally, there is an automatic adjustment. How? This price specific flow mechanism. So at automatic adjustments when a balance of payment surplus led to a gold inflow. Okay. Gold inflow lead to higher prices, which reduce surplus. How reduce surplus? There is an outflow. Similarly, gold outflow led to lower prices and increased surplus. Any question? However, there are problems with gold. So we had a gold exchange standard. So first of all, gold was not available in all the countries. Huh? So there were gold exchange standard. So where only US and Britain were allowed to hold gold reserves, only US and Britain were allowed to hold. Others could hold both gold, dollar, or UK pound. Now during 1925 to 1931, during this period, naturally UK was the largest economy. Till 1931, UK was the largest economy. Rather, as I have told you earlier also, US overtook UK sometimes in 64, 65, 66 after the Second World War. So here, but US was also coming up. So it was US, UK and gold. So say for example, countries like India, how India could print money? Either by keeping gold reserve or by keeping dollar reserve or by keeping pound reserve. So again, there was a problem in 1931. So currencies devalued in 1931 led to trade wars. So everybody, all the countries, because there is a concept you also know, that is if your currency is devalued, you gain export competitiveness. So in 1931, there was a trade war, currencies were devalued. So there was a Bretton Woods conference. Probably you have heard about this Bretton Woods conference. It was a very famous thing. In fact, you can also study something more on Bretton Woods because that is definitely interesting. There are 44 countries which represented, which were present there. John Maynard Keynes. You have heard about Keynes a lot. Keynesian economics, everything. So Keynes gave a very good proposal, which was definitely not accepted by US. So Keynes's proposal was not accepted. Even he gave a fantastic proposal where this problem would have been solved. Since it was not accepted, so naturally it's a part of economics. There was an economic theory behind it anyway. However, basic idea of calling this Bretton Woods conference was to avoid future protectionist and destructive economic policies. What was the destructive economic policy? Devaluation of currency for increasing export, because everybody has an idea that if you devalue your currency, you can increase your export. That is not the case. So Bretton Woods system ran from 1946 to 71, and in the Bretton Woods agreement, it was decided that US dollar will be the key currency. Just remember, just before Bretton Woods system, we had gold exchange standard where we had US dollar, gold, and UK pound. Now slowly US dollar is overtaking UK pound, and it became the major currency, and it was valued at $1 is equal to 1 upon 35 ounce of, or rather $35 is equal to 1 ounce of gold. So all other currencies are linked to this rate. Okay, suppose again 100 rupees is equal to 1 ounce of gold. So accordingly, $35 will be equal to 100 rupees. $1 is equal to how much? So that was the basic rate. So the entire world is still now on a fixed exchange rate system, and it was allowed to fluctuate by 1% above or below the initial set limit. So if it fluctuates more than that, the member countries, they were supposed to maintain this rate by buying, and central bank will maintain this rate by buying and selling gold or dollar. Again, 1971, there was a problem. There are high inflation in US. So since there was high inflation in US, naturally US dollar depreciated. So what was $35 per ounce of gold, that was revised to $38 per ounce of gold. So in 1971, so 1973, the system collapsed. The entire world was on a freely floating exchange rate system. So now nobody maintains this Bretton Woods system. So it is post Bretton Woods system. So now we have a freely floating. Some people, as I've told you, the exchange rate mechanism, people, some are in the fixed rate system, some are in the floating rate system, and most of the countries, they try to take advantage of both the systems and so on. So we have 5 minutes. 5 minutes. It will not be possible for me to explain entirely what are the why US dollar. So here you get the basic thing, that is slowly how US dollar became popular. Now today, next class, you just remind me, we'll start with how US dollar is so safe, and why, despite of huge amount of current account deficit and despite of so much of public debt, why US dollar is still considered to be the safest asset, number one. And number two is why US dollar is so popular. That I'll explain. Anyway, in between, let me also tell you there are a lot of events which happened, and they have an impact on the exchange rate of different countries. So one is OPEC and oil crisis in 1973-74, where all the oil producing countries, especially OPEC, they increased the price of oil by 4 times. Now imagine a situation when the price of oil goes up by 4 times. All these OPEC countries, they had a huge amount of balance of payment surplus. But think about the countries like India, we had a deficit. So what happened? Normally debtors nation. We borrowed money. So not only India, there are other countries which borrowed money from them, and there was a huge debt crisis in 1980s. So there are a lot of other events, dollar crisis of 77, 71. So these are the things which you can read on your own from the book, but these have impact on the exchange rate of different countries. Again, the rising dollar. So even you have impact on the financial crisis of 2007 on the exchange rate. So even this recent dollar crisis, recent oil crisis. Now you must, I don't know whether you have seen, oil has crossed $87 a barrel, $88. So naturally, we are paying a huge amount of money for buying oil, which definitely will create some kind of problem. Though we have a huge amount of substantial amount of foreign exchange reserve. So in the Asian crisis and in the Argentina crisis, we have seen that you are not only vulnerable to your internal problem, you are also vulnerable to external shocks. And we can, from those two, we have concluded that if you are internally strong, then it will be easier for you to absorb the external shocks. So that is why both the things are important. So that is why a sound economic policy, there we have seen sound monetary and fiscal policy is also important. So if you are internally not strong, it will be difficult for you to absorb those external shocks. So prior to 1991, we had a problem because we did not have foreign exchange reserves. Now this time it will not be so much of a problem because we have a huge amount of foreign exchange reserves. Anyway, so just given an example. Again, these are all sinking dollar. Now, why we are talking mainly about dollar? Because dollar is the most dominant currency in the world. So these are European monetary system. We'll do when in our next chapter when we'll do euro. At that time, we'll do the European monetary system in detail. So, any question? So this part, European monetary system, we'll do in detail. Any question, confusion?
No, sir.
Anyway, let me also tell you that your participation in the case study discussion was not good because what I could make out, most of the people did not read the case, only few. Anyway, next class, just remind me before I start the foreign exchange market. Next class, just remind me. We'll start with why US dollar is the dominant currency in the world. How it became the dominant currency in the world. Why US dollar is so safe. Okay. So okay then. Bye. Stay safe.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.